Hi, my name's Sean, and welcome to my channel, The Agency Advantage, where you can find out what it's like to work in pharma and also hints and tips for how to find a job in pharma. Hit like and subscribe for more helpful tips for how to find a job in pharma. Hi, everyone. So, on today's episode, I'm going to get into the topic of things people wish they knew before they started in pharma. I actually asked some people for input and I've changed some of the text, obviously for anonymity purposes. So I thought I'd take a look at some of the comments and questions that I got. So let's get into it. So the first one is there are really good, talented people, but the systems can actually inhibit talent. Now, I think what this is getting at is something that I think doesn't just apply to pharma, but it also could apply to corporate environments in general, that you can be really good at your job, you can be a high performer, but I think the systems, and I think this could refer to some of the internal project management systems and things like financial systems, procurement systems that can actually inhibit a little bit people being able to do their job. But also, I think it's most likely linked to just the fact that getting promotions can be tricky because there's so many people involved that need to discuss things, approve things. It can be quite slow as well. And I think that's just generally speaking because of the size of the companies. That's not always the case. But yeah, it can be a big issue for big pharma companies. Maybe it's less so of an issue for smaller pharma companies and smaller kind of startups. So the next one is actually one that I added here because this is my experience and something that I kind of regret when I first started out in pharma. And this is, I wish I knew that doing a lot of work and working hard is actually going to negatively impact getting promoted. And I think what I mean here isn't that you should hardly do any work and like only have one project and shirk your responsibilities. Absolutely not. It's more about that I think you should be really thoughtful about what you take. Instead of taking on 10 projects, take on 3 projects and do them really well. Just learning to set boundaries, learning to say no to taking on and things like that. I think that all kind of demonstrates leadership skills. It demonstrates that you're able to prioritize. It demonstrates that you're able to set boundaries, which I think is really seen as the strong leadership skills that when you're more junior in your career, you think that doing lots and lots of things is great, is doing things that are high priority and will have the greatest impact. So it's just about identifying those types of things to focus your attention on and not focusing on these kind of low impact projects. This is a good one. Unfortunately, this is something that's possibly quite unique to big corporations and big pharma versus smaller companies. And if you've come from clinical, if you've come from laboratory or maybe an agency, then you might be quite surprised by this. But the number of restructures that happen was a shock. And often the people who are let go, not based on performance, more often it's simply whole departments that go. Yeah, often it can be a bit demotivating actually, because you can be really fantastic. You could potentially save the company thousands. You could be really fantastic individual contributor, can be great at your job, really well liked internally. But if your department goes, then you could lose your job. The good news is that often there'll be other kind of roles created in a restructure that really great people should be kept on. But it's quite difficult to grasp when you come from another type of industry into pharma, that you can be fantastic at your job, but restructure happen quite often. I would say every 2 or 3 years, there's some kind of reorganizational restructure. They can be huge restructures where whole therapy areas are cut, whole departments are cut, or it could be minor restructures where just different departments move under the management of another department. So that takes a little bit of getting used to, coming in from another industry into pharma. Okay, so this one is an interesting one. There are a lot of great people in agency, but unlike agency, where the bad underperformers get fired quickly, there is also dead wood. Okay, so I think what they're saying here is in an agency, they're quite agile. So if there's somebody who's really underperforming or really struggling, maybe agency life isn't for them, then they'll either take themselves out of the game or they'll be fired. And so it does mean that you get this kind of positive selection of really good people in agency. Unfortunately, that's not the case in big companies. It just wouldn't be able to be the case just because they're not agile enough. So I wouldn't say there's a lot of people who are not great, but there could be a few people that still maintain positions just because it can be difficult to fire them maybe, or can fly under the radar a bit because you're in pharma, you tend to be working in isolation. You could not attend meetings because you could say, oh, I'm working on other things, or I have a conflict. And I've seen that happen. And it's much easier to go quite a long time before people notice that somebody isn't doing their job. Okay, so this is a good one. A career in pharma limits where you can live in the world. Now, this is true, and I think it's especially true now that many companies are returning to in office, either full time or hybrid. It really means that you have to live in a hub area. So places like London, New York, New Jersey, Boston, Basel. There's many other cities as well, but it does mean that you can't work anywhere. It's quite difficult to find fully remote roles. I'm not saying they don't exist, but I think most companies now are bringing back into kind of at least hybrid or fully back in office. So you do need to be quite flexible, which I think is easier if you're single, but if you've got a family, you have to be willing to move your family wherever the jobs are. And many people are quite happy with that, but not everyone is. This is really interesting. And I hadn't really experienced this, but I have witnessed it. So to advance later on in your career, you need to have come from an affiliate and preferably a priority country, i.e. the US, Germany, EU7, Japan, China, Canada, and Brazil. This is a good one because I, for example, started in global, and I know many other people who started their career in global. And it's great to start in global because I think there's lots of opportunities, but as you progress up the career ladder into area lead, for example, or commercial lead, I think without having that kind of country experience where you're working more on launching in country, I think it starts to limit how far you can go in your career because you don't have that country experience. So it might mean that you have to go and get that experience. So you could be working in global, and then you might need to go back into country to gain some experience. Then you can come back again and then progress. Or yeah, so this is a really good one, and it's something that only really recently I realized. Oh, this is a sad one, but I think it's true of any industry. I don't think this is necessarily pharma specific, but I wish I knew that not everyone cares about what they are working on, and in reality, the external impact it has. So I think what this is getting at is it could be you're working on oncology, but that person can just move around therapy areas and they don't really care. And it's almost treated as if they could go and work for Coca-Cola and then back into pharma. That it's just a job to them. And I think there are many people like that. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I do think it is easier if you are really passionate about what you're working on. And it does make for a better environment as well if you're working for people who have a shared vision to really try and help the medical community in some way or the patients in some way. I think that kind of gives a bit more meaning to your work. So I can understand why someone's commented this, but yeah, it's the reality of any large company. Not everyone has the same values or the same thing that's driving them. I hope you enjoyed that episode. You can subscribe to my channel for more great content. And if you're on it, follow me on Instagram, The Agency Advantage 101. See you again soon.